she's not a natural fit, put it that way. Not on the international stage.
She's not prime ministerial, is she?
No, but you know, sometimes it takes someone who can break the mould, and there's nothing wrong with that. If you actually think back to when Mrs Thatcher took power, she didn't look like a Tory MP. It was enormously hard for her to win selection in Finchley, and she was quite a big character. Just because she's on the other end of this political spectrum doesn't make her, you know, different.
And in 1975, when she got the leadership, Mrs Thatcher was quite shrill. She had a squeaky voice.
Yep. Remember Airy Neve?
And she was out of her depth.
Yeah, Airy Neve, and I can never remember the name of the other politician, but they both encouraged her to have not just media training. I don't think she had much in the way of media training. She had actual voice coaching, as you say, to lower the timbre of her voice. That was very important to convey authority. But what she didn't have, and this has become disastrous in modern day politicians, is too much media training, where they are taught to bridge or pivot away from what they've been asked into what they want to say. And the public has got heartily sick of that response. Margaret Thatcher said what she meant and meant what she said.
Well, let's get the views of Fraser Myers, who's another of my absolute favourite journalists in the country, deputy editor of Spiked Online. Good morning, Fraser.
Good morning, Mark. Thank you so much for having me.
Listen, it's great to see you. Love Spiked, love the podcast as well. Fraser, can I ask you, is it when, not if now, for Starmer's departure?
Oh, absolutely. This has got to be the beginning of the end. And unfortunately, Starmer is the slowest kid in the class, so he seems to be the only person who hasn't realised that his time is up. And I think that's why he hasn't taken any decisive moves this week. Everyone would be expecting at least a sacking of, say, Morgan McSweeney, who lobbied very hard for Peter Mandelson to have been given the ambassadorial role. But that hasn't happened yet by the time we're speaking. I don't think he realises that he has a lot to do in order just to stay on beyond the May elections. And, you know, that's going to be a bloodbath in the local elections, and also the Scottish elections and the Welsh elections. His position feels untenable now. It's definitely going to be untenable after that. But you can also see why no other Labour leader wants to make a move before those elections, because they don't want to be tainted by that terrible result either. So everyone wants him to go, but no one wants to be the one to make the first move. So the herd hasn't moved yet, unfortunately.
Well, no, that's right. I mean, Linda Jubilee earlier in the studio suggested that, yes, there's a logic to these figures like Rayner and Streeting moving after May, because they don't want, as you say, Fraser, to be tainted by that bloodbath. The only question is whether Starmer can cling on for that long, given the growing scandals engulfing his government.
Well, absolutely. And let's be clear, if things are as they appear, if Mandelson really did share that sensitive market information with a convicted paedophile, as the Epstein file suggests, there is obviously a police investigation ongoing and we shouldn't want to prejudice that. But if that is the case, this is the biggest political scandal since Profumo. And it's been happening under a government and under a leader who presents himself as whiter than white. He said that he was going to be the one to end Tory sleaze, that there would be no scandals of this nature on his watch. That let's think about, you know, some of the scandals that have brought down, you know, previous prime ministers. If you think that it makes Partygate look like the Tea Party that it really was, a scandal of this nature, and yet Starmer is constantly just deflecting, blaming other people, presenting himself as the victim of Mandelson's lies, even though he had information showing that Mandelson wasn't telling the truth, even though he was fully informed, I think, of Mandelson's wrongdoing. It just doesn't make any sense. I think Starmer, his judgment has been shown to be absolutely appalling, and I can't see a way out of it for him.
Well, it's very interesting, obviously, to watch how it plays out. Is Angela Rayner, do you think, Fraser, the likely replacement?
Well, I think we would normally say that, but she does still have this tax scandal hanging over her, the £40,000 potentially unpaid stamp duty. And it's interesting, just about everyone you think of as the most viable replacement has some sort of black mark against their name. So with Rayner, it's the tax scandal. With Wes Streeting, it's his very close association to Peter Mandelson. He's a Mandelson protege. with someone like Shabana Mahmood. She's quite sensible, and therefore she will never be chosen by Labour MPs and the Labour membership to be leader. So it is hard to see where we go from here. It would be nice, actually, potentially to see maybe a more open leadership contest. Perhaps there are some backbenchers. I doubt it very much, but there might be some backbenchers who are impressive and could really turn things around. I have very small hopes for that. But all of the front runners, I think, are pretty poor. And maybe Labour will even regret getting rid of Starmer. I don't know.
Well, that's interesting, Fraser, because with me in the studio is the broadcaster and journalist Linda Jubilee. And Linda, with those wishing to evict Keir Starmer from number 10, given that he's more of a centrist figure within the party, is it a case of be careful what you wish for?
A lot of people have been saying that. But I think that he will go, as I said earlier. I think that it will happen, not that quickly, but it could easily happen after the Gorton and Denton by-election. I think that will be a very significant result to watch for. But I think something about Keir Starmer, Harriet Harman actually had it right when she said, the trouble is he's not apologising properly. It's just some form of word salad that he's put together that sounds like an apology. It's not a real apology, and that is the very least that he should do, and that still, I don't think, would be enough. The problem is that Sir Keir Starmer and other people in the Labour leadership, and in fact a lot of politicians, exist in a Westminster bubble where they start to pick over things until they're dealing with the minute detail, and they are not looking at the broad picture of how the general public view this. And that does become important. You know, they often will ignore what polls say, and they'll say the only poll that counts is the general election, etc., etc. But the way people think does count when it comes to this type of issue. When it involves issues of ethics and morality, where people say, I'm struggling to hold it all together, to make the grocery bill every week, to pay for my kids to do X, Y and Z. And meanwhile, I look at this shower of people who are totally letting not just the country down internally, but have made us a laughing stock on the world stage.
And it's interesting, Fraser, isn't it? Because any replacement to Starmer is bound to be to the left of the party, because the electorate that will choose the next Prime Minister are left-wing. Those are Labour backbenchers who refuse the government's rather modest changes to the scope of disability benefits. And it's a membership, many of whom are quite fond of the Green Party these days. They are more left-wing than this incumbent administration. So therefore, if the country does shift to the left under a new Prime Minister, what are the implications, Fraser, for the economy, for taxes, for the debt burden? What are the implications for net zero and illegal immigration, do you think?
Well, I think they're pretty dire, because we've already seen actually Keir Starmer being swayed by his more left-wing backbenchers. You know, that has basically put off welfare reform until at least the next Parliament. It means we're certainly going to have net zero until at least the next Parliament, which is absolutely crippling the economy. The report came out recently saying that 400 jobs are being lost a fortnight in Aberdeen alone, in the oil and gas industry. So it is pretty disastrous, unfortunately. And, you know, I have some respect for some figures on the left, but I think they haven't quite updated, they haven't quite noticed what's going on. They haven't quite realised how unsustainable the UK's debt levels are. You know, we're spending more on debt interests than we are on defence and on education. Now, in an alternative universe, I would say 10 years ago, maybe you could have made the case for more borrowing to invest, but we can't afford to do that in this current moment. They've completely missed what has changed. They've missed the fact that welfare is unsustainable. They haven't realised that the reason so many people are claiming benefits is not because there has been actually an explosion in the number of people who are disabled, but because you're allowed to claim for mental health and anxiety. And so they're not living in the real world, unfortunately. And so that is going to be a real problem. It just means many, many more years of drift, many, many more years of trouble, and a much bigger mess for whoever comes in next to clean up.
Now, Linda, the ruthless Prime Minister may fire his Chief of Staff, Morgan McSweeney, of course, the architect of his election victory in 2024. and he may fire him for political expediency, but it will come at a price, won't it, for a Prime Minister with no ideas, no philosophy. McSweeney is the brains of the outfit.
Well, I mean, and also suggested by Peter Mandelson, so sooner or later he will have to go. But it's no good sacking an advisor and throwing him under the bus. Heavy the head that wears the crown, frankly. He has to go. But it will be a problem because Morgan McSweeney is an intelligent man. He has devised a campaign.
He's given Starmer all his ideas, hasn't he? I mean, isn't he a bit like Cyrano de Bergerac? He's the one actually saying the words and Starmer acting them out.
Yeah, I mean, and it shows. It's no good. I think that Sir Keir Starmer is kind of acting, and that's what people don't like. What they want, to use an overworked word really, but I still think it's a proper word, they like authenticity. They like someone who stands up in front of them and sounds authentic. And Sir Keir Starmer does not sound authentic. That's partly his delivery, but he could do something about that. But it's also because right from the start, he didn't really have a vision, and without a vision you can't form a strategy, and then you can't deliver it properly. You're always caught out on the hop when you don't firmly believe in what you're talking about. And he's not showing the commitment to any idea, because maybe he just doesn't have a central idea.
What does it tell us, Fraser, about Sir Keir Starmer as a politician, that he's so dependent, so reliant on his chief of staff, not just for practical reasons, but ideologically too?
Well, I think if we've hit the nail on the head there. I mean, Keir Starmer is completely empty. He has no vision, no principles, no policy preferences. And so, yes, he clearly has to look to someone like Morgan McSweeney for guidance. But I think there is a danger of overstating this man's intelligence. There's a lot of, broadsheet press coverage talks of him as some sort of guru, as some sort of genius mastermind. When you think, well, this man is the chief strategist, and his strategy, part of that, was to hire Peter Mandelson and give him, one of the most plumbish jobs in the British government, the ambassadorship to Washington. And to not know that this was going to blow up in everyone's face is extraordinary. I mean, the man is literally nicknamed the Prince of Darkness. You could interview people on the street and ask them, what do you think of Peter Mandelson? And they would tell you unanimously, this man is bad news. But perhaps, I don't know, galaxy brain Morgan McSweeney thought this was a genius strategy that was going to, Lord knows what kind of 4D chess he was playing there. But clearly, this element of it has blown up in their face. And yeah, Morgan McSweeney should carry the can for that in some respect. But it's only because Starmer is so empty that he's allowed this to take place. A more authoritative leader would have put his foot down and said, hang on, why are we doing this? This is crazy. This is going to get us into trouble. But Starmer has no political nous, no political knowledge, so he wouldn't have been able to do that, I'm afraid.
Is there any scenario, Linda, in which Starmer surprises everyone and survives?
Well, I was trying to think that through on the way to the studio, and I can't see a scenario where that can happen. But politics is a surprising place. A lot can happen just in, well, we used to say 7 days is a long time in politics, but it's now like 7 minutes. Every time you turn the radio on or the television on, something else appalling has happened. It's hard to see how he could fight his way out of this one. I can't see a scenario where that would happen.
Is there any scenario, Fraser, in which Starmer's replacement, whether it's Angela Rayner, Ed Miliband, Wes Streeting, is there any scenario where a new Prime Minister will improve the fortunes of my viewers and listeners and be successful?
I think a new Prime Minister won't improve the fortunes of viewers and listeners, but they could improve the fortunes of the Labour Party. And I think one possibility that I think is under-discussed is that Labour sneaks in at the next election via some sort of coalition, potentially a minority government. I think if Labour is able to successfully frame the election as Labour versus Reform, if they are seen as the anti-Reform party, they might pick up a lot of votes. A lot of people might go for that. I mean, it's not my position, just to be clear, but I think there are, I know a lot of people who would be motivated to vote against Reform. So there is potential success for the Labour Party. They shouldn't be written off just yet, as empty as they seem to be at the moment. But I do think it's over for Starmer. I can't see a recovery from this particular scandal.
Well, let's take a clip. This is Angela Rayner explaining her career ambitions a year ago.
Absolutely not. And I don't want to be leader of the Labour Party. I'm very happy and honoured to do the job.
What kind of politician are you? You don't want to be leader of your party?
No, I'm very happy and honoured and to be Deputy Prime Minister of this country. And I've got a lot in my in-tray to prove that I can do the job that I'm doing and deliver on the milestones for the people of this country. That's what I'm interested in, Trevor.
You know this is being recorded, don't you? Because actually, that means one day, if you do, somebody's going to play it back to you.
Absolutely. I'll be happy for you to play it back to me. I have no desire to go for the leadership of the Labour Party. My desire is to deliver for the people of this country who have given me opportunities beyond what I could have dreamed of.
There you go. What does that tell you, Linda Jubilee?
Well, it tells you that most politicians of all sides, regard the truth as a movable feast.
Oh, what a lie. What a lie.
It is so extraordinary that I just don't think that politicians who exist, as I keep saying, it's never changed, exist in the Westminster bubble, seem to think that they can talk without telling the truth. I mean, it is extraordinary, and that phrase, well, I saw that go out live, that'll come back to haunt her.
Notwithstanding the current challenges facing the Prime Minister, is a desire for his replacement something we should be careful what we wish for?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. You know, if it were to be Angela Rayner, that would simply make Britain a joke. But what would not be a joke would be what she would do to the country, with her very, very anti-employer views, her strong views that workers should have every last right and every last rise, regardless of what that does to business. She would be a disaster. So, yes, we should be very, very careful what we wish for. But on the other hand, I can't imagine that anybody in this country is wishing to have Keir Starmer for another 3 years.
In regards to the Prime Minister's appointment of Lord Mandelson to this very key diplomatic role of UK Ambassador to the United States, can you think of a scandal of this scale in recent political memory, Anne?
No, you've got to go back to Profumo to get there, I think. No, I can't. And I'm rather baffled by the whole thing because maybe, you know, Mandelson could pull the wool over Starmer's eyes, but the security services must have known. Of course they must have known. And it's very difficult to understand how this came about.
Well, indeed. And at the heart of this is a Prime Minister with a consistently poor judgment, Anne.
Yeah, that's absolutely true, and a very weak Prime Minister. And bear in mind, it's less than 2 years since the last general election. You know, it is amazing that he should have fallen apart so quickly. Indeed, it started to happen within weeks, not even within months.
Most definitely. He's out of his depth, isn't he?
Oh, he's completely out of his depth. He's never shown any sign, literally, since he was elected as Prime Minister. He hasn't shown any sign of ever having his head above water. I don't think he is in control of anything. He's not in control of his own party. He's not in control of his own appointments. He makes a mess of them. Well, it's sad in a way, but on the other hand, it's the country that's suffering.
And is it when, not if, he goes now?
I think it must be. I think it must be. I think the only thing that would... I don't think he'll go before the May elections. I think it would be suicidal for the Labour Party. It already is, really, but suicidal for the Labour Party to be engaged in internecine warfare right up until the local elections. But after that, I think members of particularly the Parliamentary Labour Party, they will be asking themselves, you know, if we go on with this man, what is the outcome going to be? But as I say, be careful what you wish for. It could be Angela Rayner, and that would be worse, quite honestly. That would be worse. I know it's difficult to believe it, but it would be.
Well, it's hard to imagine that a figure like Wes Streeting or Shavana Mahmood would win with that very left-wing electorate of the Labour backbenchers and the party membership.
And the trade unions. I mean, that is absolutely true, but Keir Starmer used to be regarded as a moderate. You know, he was elected and They eventually elected Blair after a very long period of electoral oblivion. So they do, from time to time, come to their senses. But at the moment, I think they're all at 6s and 7s.
And therefore, Angela Rayner brings some allure, doesn't she? She's a darling of the so-called soft left, and we need to rephrase soft left. They're anything but soft, Anne. They are hard left.
They're hard left, and she is hard left. And there's no question at all of, I mean, soft left is akin to the Liberals. These people are very, very hard left. Angela Rayner has pitched for that vote, for the hard left vote. She will undeniably be a candidate when the time comes, and there is a real risk that she could win.
Well, that's exactly right. Now, when you say things will get worse under Angela Rayner, I think we need to war game what her premiership might look like, Anne, because it's not fantasy politics. I think it's the most likely outcome, given her backstory, given her popularity within the party movement. So if she becomes Prime Minister, what happens, for example, to the economy?
Well, what happens to the economy is there will be enormous public sector pay rises, because she has always backed pay rises as opposed to restraint.
Because she's in the pocket of the unions.
Well, because she also, and she believes it. I mean, she really does believe that workers' rights come first, and that includes pay rises, that workers' rights come first, and that everything else somehow will muddle along. Well, you know, life isn't actually like that, and I think it would be a terrible mess. I also seriously can't see her representing Britain on the world stage. I mean, can you?
I think it would be embarrassing. And also, Anne, I'm just wondering about illegal immigration under Angela Rayner. Given that she's from the left of the party, there will be no political will to stop the boats.
I think her only problem there would be that there is a growing frustration in the Labour Party ranks, and I mean in the country as well as in Parliament, with the way that immigration is dominating the agenda, and they're not getting on top of it. So she might find it a bit more difficult to brush that under the carpet.
And stay with us. Georgina is in London. Good morning, Georgina.
Good morning, Mark. Good morning, Anne. Lovely to see you again.
You too, Georgina. Is it when, not if, Starmer goes?
Absolutely. I mean, I watched him, this man fight for his political life yet again, and it's utterly embarrassing watching him giving a speech that's in total contradiction with all that he truly stands for. His apology must have stuck in his throat like a shard of glass, Mark, but it cuts no ice with the British people because he has financially crippled the hard-working, tax-paying people in this country. He most certainly can't plead plausible deniability, as he was the Director of Public Prosecutions. He's too much of a stickler for detail not to do his due diligence, and he is no paragon of virtue despite what he would like us all to think. With great power comes great responsibility, Mark, but the flip side of that being the final responsibility must always be taken by the person in charge, and that's Keir Starmer. I don't think that I'm the only one taking maybe just a tad of enjoyment watching Keir Starmer squirm as he loses his grip on both his power and his dictatorship. And no doubt he will throw Morgan McSweeney to the wolves as a sacrificial lamb to save his own skin. But how dare he apologise to the victims of the heinous crimes committed by those powerful men, Epstein's friends, when he himself has failed abysmally to protect them and hundreds of thousands of young girls who've been and are still being abused within our own realm. Keir Starmer's admission that he knew that Mandelson had a close friendship with Epstein, the prolific pedophile, before he yet again put Mandelson in a position of power, signs the death knell on Starmer's premiership. He was well aware of Mandelson's dealings, and he knew Mandelson's character, as he'd been caught out twice previously and had had a substantial six-figure payout from the public purse for both his treachery and his deceit. And we most certainly knew that this man was a danger to international and national security, as his love for money has always outweighed his love for our country. If Starmer wants to see an even greater risk to our national or international security, he need only look in a mirror, Mark. There's no coming back for Keir Starmer, and the vultures are already circling. All those involved, Starmer, Hermer, Brown, Blair, McSweeney and Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor, must be questioned by an independent body, and they must not be allowed to mark their own homework on this occasion. Total transparency must be the end result of this investigation, so we know exactly what went on. But I do worry what's to come with regard to the future leadership of this disgraceful political party. But as far as I'm concerned, Mark, Keir Starmer is now napalm to the tinderbox that is the Labour Party, and he must resign.
Wow, Georgina, thank you for a very powerful call. And here is the Prime Minister at a press conference yesterday explaining the background to his appointment of Lord Mandelson as UK Ambassador to the United States.
Before he was appointed Ambassador, Mandelson was asked directly about the nature of his relationship with Epstein. He was asked whether he had stayed at Epstein after his conviction. He was asked whether he had accepted gifts and hospitality, about whether he had been fully transparent about the relationship. He portrayed Epstein as someone he barely knew. And when that became clear, and it was not true, I sacked him.
Well, there you go. Are you convinced by that defence, Anne Widdecombe?
Well, hardly, and the way he says at the end, as if he's being, really strong and emphatic, I sacked him. By that stage, he had absolutely no choice, and he knows it. So it was pretty pathetic. But as I said to you earlier on, the security services must have known the depths. They wouldn't know all the detail, but the depths of that relationship. And it was an appointment that should never, ever have been risked. And I don't understand why it was risked for this reason. Trump is pretty unpredictable and he's pretty capricious about, policies. And you actually need, in those circumstances, given that he is the leader of the Western world, you do actually need, in those circumstances, somebody who knows absolutely what they're doing. And that points to a very senior career diplomat. Why Mandelson was ever appointed? I mean, forget all the other stuff and who knew what. Forget that. Why was Mandelson ever appointed, even if he'd been purer than pure and whiter than white? Why was he ever appointed in the first place? I don't get it.
And Anne, you're a practicing Christian. There is a moral dimension to this story, isn't there? Because at the heart of this are young women that were trafficked for sex.
Yeah, absolutely. And they are the victims in all of this. Now, it wouldn't have been any different if Mandelson had not been friends with Epstein. They would still have been trafficked for sex. But I need a lot of convincing that somebody who's as sharp as Mandelson is, and he is sharp, I need a lot of convincing that he didn't know what was going on.
And what about Sir Keir Starmer's concern for the victims of Epstein's crimes? Is that not a little rich? As touched on briefly by Georgina there, this is the same Prime Minister that has continually resisted having a national inquiry into the rape gangs.
Exactly. So, I mean, the two do not sit easily together. I do believe that Keir Starmer will have sympathy with the victims of Epstein. I mean, I'm not going to paint Keir Starmer as dark and evil. I don't think he is. I think he's just a natural messer up. And he's done it big time on this occasion.
Most definitely. And have you spent time with Peter Mandelson? What do you know of him?
Hardly anything at all. Obviously, we overlapped in Parliament. He was then the architect of New Labour. Do you remember Blair saying, I don't know what I have to do to get my party to love Peter Mandelson?
Yes.
Because he did believe in things like, a lot of money and all the rest of it. A lot of the Labour Party simply didn't like it. But he was one of the major architects of New Labour. He was, if you remember at the time, their spin master. And I remember people in the party saying to me, where's our Peter Mandelson? Why haven't we got a spin master? And I did actually say at the time, I did actually say, quick, show me who he is and I'll get rid of him now.
Well, exactly, because, Anne, given the fact that he brought spin to this country, that's another egregious degree of damage that he's wreaked on Britain. Peter Mandelson is part of the rather poisonous, toxic political atmosphere in which we now inhabit. If he invented spin, he's got a case to answer.
He invented spin. Well, he certainly took spin to heights.
Specialised in it, yeah.
Specialised in spin, yes, even if he didn't invent it. But he also, of course, don't forget the things that happened when that Labour administration came in. The civil service was virtually politicised. And, you know, press officers were politicised. And it was a very, very different sort of Britain by the time they finished from how it had been at the start. So I think Mandelson has to answer for an awful lot. But again, forget Epstein, forget all the rest of it. This man had already made two massive, I wouldn't even call them blunders because they were wrongdoings in office. He had already had to resign twice. Why on earth? What was the big merit of Mandelson that made Starmer take this risk?
And Anne, before I let you go, crystal ball time. Is it likely now that Angela Rayner enters number 10 by late summer of this year?
It's certainly a strong possibility. If the Labour Party has any sense of self-preservation, it won't let that happen. But just look at the Labour Party at the moment and ask yourself, do they have that sense?
Oh, I love you, Mark Dolan. I love listening to your monologues. You're absolutely spot on, and you express it so beautifully.
Well, you're very kind, and half the time I'll get it wrong, Edwina, but I'm like you. I say what I think. I've got a degree of common sense, and let's see how that is judged by history. What are your thoughts about the Prime Minister's situation? You're no stranger to political scandal and intrigue. Is it when, not if, he goes now?
Yes, I think so. And in fact, you've outlined extremely well exactly why that's the case. If Starmer's history up to this point, apart from appointing Peter Mandelson, was a record of tremendous success and he was doing really well and he'd been ahead in the polls and so on, then appointing Peter Mandelson could be taken, as Starmer wants it to be, as an aberration, as a mistake, as something completely different from the way he's behaved before. But in fact, his ineptness and incompetence, I think, is very much on show. And his speech yesterday at that press conference, I listened to in full, is cringe-worthy, because what he set out was who he thinks he is. He thinks he's a good guy. You know, I'm a lovely person. I'm a moral person. I came into politics for all the right reasons. How could I possibly make a mistake? It must be because somebody else has lied to me. And you think, oh, for heaven's sake, what is it about this man, Peter Mandelson's been sacked by 2 prime ministers? The odds are that you'll have to sack him as well. What is it that this man, it appears in all the information about Epstein as a close friend over many decades? There's more information coming out. What are the odds that he's going to be in there and it's going to be deeper and it's going to be nastier? You know, you have to think ahead. If you're a minister, if you're in charge of something, you always have to ask, all right, now what can go wrong? And I suspect what happened in this case was that Peter came forward the moment Trump was elected and said, I'm your man. I'm your man. I know all these people. I have an extensive and slightly shady contacts book. And I've been in the same room as Trump lots and lots of times. And you know he's very dodgy. Well, I'm very dodgy too, and I can handle all that, and I'll do it for the sake of the country. All you have to do is pay me and make me a UK ambassador to the United States. And Starmer's kind of looked at the 2 pages of vetting and said, you know, have you still got friendship with Giuffre Epstein? And the true answer is no, he's been dead since 2019, but don't have a look at what was happening 10 years before. And he said, all right, you're in, you're in. And it proves to the world that Starmer is an idiot, an absolute idiot. And that's the person we've got running the country at the moment.
Well, that's the irony and the tragedy for the Prime Minister, is he's the author of his own downfall. He shot himself in the foot so many times, picking fights, for example, with farmers that he wasn't going to win. He's had to U-turn on that. Digital ID, that's a hot mess of a policy, dead on arrival. The list is endless of the U-turns, and his political judgment has let him down on multiple occasions.
He doesn't have any political judgment. He's a lawyer. And he's not just any kind of lawyer, he's a human rights lawyer, which means that most of what he was doing in his career was going into courts with rather sympathetic judges, backed by rather sympathetic people like Lord Harmer, who is also in government with him now, and arguing the case on the minutiae and the nitty-gritty of this bit of legislation that wasn't well drafted, or that bit that could be interpreted differently, or what the European Convention on Human Rights said in the 1950s, and winning these cases, sometimes actually doing prosecutions when he was DPP as well, of people who didn't deserve to be prosecuted, like some of the some of our soldiers in Northern Ireland, for example, who did their duty as well as they possibly could. Now, he's not been a man who, like me and like many people in politics, have gone into a room full of 1,000 people who don't agree with you and persuaded them that your point of view is right. He's never had to come up against real discussion, real debate. It hasn't worked like that for him. And so in the House of Commons and as leader, he doesn't interrogate the information. You know, what is it about don't touch Mandelson with a barge pole that you didn't get, Keir? I mean, my anxiety now is very similar to yours. What happens next? Who is going to take over? It's not going to be this week. It could well be after the Gorton and Denton by-election on February 26th. The sixth safest Labour seat in the country, where I suspect that Labour might welcome almost bottom of the poll. I mean, there's lots of, as you've just read out, lots of candidates. Wouldn't it be nice if the Monster Looney Party actually won it? That would be a real smack in the eye for everybody. That's not completely impossible. Most Labour voters in that seat who are decent people will simply stay home. So the turnout's going to be much lower, even in the general election, where it didn't even reach 50%. At that point, Starmer is very vulnerable. But come the local elections in May, right through the country, Labour is going to do extremely badly, and thousands of Labour councillors are going to lose their seats. At that point, I think he's a goner.
Well, I've always thought, as a keen student of political history, Edwina, that the great talent, the great gift of the Conservatives as a movement is they tended to elect prime ministers rather than leaders that they ideologically cared for. And I've always thought Labour were the opposite. They went for the likes of Michael Foot, who was a great standard bearer for the socialist cause but was never going to win power. Do you think that'll happen again if Starmer goes? Do you think they'll choose someone they love rather than thinking with their head, not their heart?
I think an awful lot of it depends on how many of the backbenchers really give consideration to do they want to get re-elected. If they elect a left-winger, you're absolutely right. If they elect Angela Rayner, who knows what else might come out about her personal financial benefits, shall we say. I mean, she's turned into a whopping great capitalist. That's the only thing you can say in her favour. She's trying to make money left, right and centre and avoid tax. But how many times has she made speeches saying how wicked that was? So she is one massive hypocrite, absolutely massive, and very vulnerable to being undermined on that sort of basis, especially if more actually comes out. You know, when you're in the public eye that much, there will be a lot of digging as to exactly what she might or might not have been doing, and how on earth somebody on a basic parliamentary salary could afford an £800,000 flat. On top of everything else. So she's quite vulnerable, and they should be aware of that. And if she is acting in a left-wing fashion, Labour will lose the next election. Wes Streeting is keeping his head down. I rather rate him. I think he's doing a good job on the health service. If he keeps his head down, he could well be the one after that. But you know what? These scandals, these failures are so complete that sometimes the party can't be rescued, and the next general election is actually not that far away now.
When you say not that far away, do you think it will go to the full term under any leader?
Oh, yes, I think so. It's strong governments like Margaret Thatcher's in the 1980s that are riding high in the polls that will go a little early, that will go, say, at 4 years instead of 5. It's weak governments, knowing that they're down in the polls and that they're very likely to lose, and that will last to the very last minute. John Majors is the obvious one, going right to the wire in 1997. So we will see. But my guess is we've got another at least 2 years of this government, but possibly under a different Prime Minister.
Well, if Angela Rayner does get the top job, what are the prospects for the country, Edwina? What are the prospects for our energy policy? What are the prospects for illegal immigration? And perhaps most importantly, the economy?
It depends who she appoints to the top jobs. If she keeps Shabana Mahmood in the Home Office, then again, that's somebody that I rate. And I think Shabana knows all the tricks of the immigration scandals and scams and so on, and is very determined to do something about it. And I think if she leaves, if Shabana is able to continue as Home Secretary, that will continue. If they want to make progress as far as the courts and reducing delays there, they're going to have to get rid of David Lammy, because he just likes dressing up and pouncing around being important. He's not actually going to sort out the Ministry of Justice at all. Rachel Reeves, I think, is a busted flush. I feel very sorry for her. To see her crying in the House of Commons is heart-wrenching, especially for me as another woman. But you know what? You've got to be tougher than that if you're going to be a Chancellor, and you've really got to be tough to take on that job, because you've got to say no, 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 no to all your colleagues. So that seems to be the way I would look at it. When it comes to security and defence, I'm kind of less worried about it, because defence has been set out very clearly. We have no choice about pushing up the amount that we spend, and I'd like to see us actually getting on with it and being part of a strong Europe, particularly against Putin.
Let's take a listen, Edwina, to Angela Rayner, leadership hopeful potentially of the Labour Party, speaking about Sleaze before being sacked for tax evasion.
In public life should mean upholding the highest standards of ethics and integrity. But the cronyism, sleaze and scandal we've seen over the past decade has undermined trust in politics and public life at home and abroad. Misconduct and sleaze has a direct impact on a government's ability to deliver for.
Well, there you go. She's pronouncing Angela Rayner there, Edwina, on sleaze and about standards in government. Of course, she was the first to attack Boris Johnson for Partygate and standing near a glass of orange juice during the pandemic. Well, there's a suggestion there that you're leaping out of the frying pan into the fire with Rayner, aren't you? She's got a rap list as long as your arm of issues, compromises to her integrity. The mystery about where she lived in the 2010s, which has never been fully cleared up, her affection for expensive Apple AirPod headphones, her campaigning against right to buy whilst profiting from the sale of her own council property, and now the avoidance of stamp duty on a property purchase as housing secretary. So it's not exactly an antidote to Starmer's sleaze, is it?
Absolutely not. I mean, I don't think Starmer himself is that sleazy. I think they made an awful lot of mistakes by accepting posh kit from a wealthy donor and supporter, and it didn't occur to them, because they are good guys. You know, this is Starmer saying, I'm a good person, how could I possibly do anything wrong? And the answer is, of course you could. It's called, how shall I pronounce it, Mark? Hypocrisy.
We know that.
I live up here, I can do that, okay? I live up here. She's in the constituency not that far away from where I'm living up in Peak District. It's called hypocrisy, and the people who don't know that they are hypocrites are the hypocrites themselves, because they're not questioning their own behaviour. They put that to one side. What I do in private doesn't impact in any way on my public job, which of course I'm doing as well as anybody possibly could. I think Rayner is a liability right from the start. Yeah. And if that's all they can produce, that's a big, big, big mistake. But there are other people in Cabinet who I think are much less open to that kind of criticism. I think it's a false criticism to say, well, you know, there's a photograph of, say, Wes Streeting with Peter Mandelson. Peter Mandelson went out campaigning with all sorts of people, and when you're out on the doorsteps, you join everybody together and get a photo taken. That doesn't mean he was in Mandelson's pocket or under his influence. I think he would be a better choice, but Well, we'll see. Have the Labour Party clung on to their collective intelligence, or have they completely lost their minds? It won't be long before we find out.
Absolutely. I think that I agree with you. I think Streeting or Shabana Mahmood would be an improvement on the current Prime Minister, but it's just a question of, you say, how tribal the party are going to be in their choice of a replacement. Just briefly, is there a limit, though, to how much damage a future Prime Minister could do to the country in the next 2 or 3 years?
No, there's no limit. They could do an enormous amount of damage. Goodness me. I mean, we're in a situation where the debt is rising month by month. The cost of the debt is sort of starting to stabilise because interest rates are coming down, which is really very, very good news. But all the promises about having more housing have basically vanished.
Yeah.
The buy-to-let market, as we all know, has disappeared. So, you know, there's things will be worse before they actually start to get better. And to some extent, Mark, I think it depends on what happens as well in the other parties. If Shabana Mahmood is on top of immigration, then that pulls the rug out from under reform to a substantial degree. And the former Tory ministers and members who have gone off to reform are going to be, you know, washed up on the shore like kind of skeleton bones from an old whale. And I think Kemi is doing a very good job with the Tory party and is to a substantial degree reclaiming the centre right, you know, the pro-business centre right that is as far as it possibly can be based on efficiency and organisation and small government. I think she could make real progress in the next couple of years, and I hope she does.
Another major public figure that's facing a crisis that threatens to engulf the whole project. It's not the government, it's the monarchy, and Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor. This is an issue that won't go away, because whilst King Charles has pulled every lever so far, including evicting Andrew from the Royal Lodge, stripping him of his Duke of York titles, his membership of the Order of the Garter, unfortunately Andrew remains his younger brother and always will. And now there are rumours that staff at the Sandringham estate that will now accommodate Andrew for free of charge for the rest of his life are going on strike and will not work for the disgraced ex-prince.
And who can blame them? Listen, I was in my car last weekend listening to you and had a cracking interview with Andrew Lowney.
Yeah.
The guy who's written the book, The Rise and Fall of the House of York. And in today's Daily Mail, across a couple of pages, he's written this piece. The headline is, I've seen US intelligence report that says Epstein reeled in sex-mad Andrew at request of Russian spies. And the whole premise of this piece is suggesting that Epstein was ultimately helping the Russians with money laundering. There's a suggestion here that also he could have been an agent, and they used that relationship with Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor as a way of getting stuff on the royals. Can I read you a chilling part of what Andrew's written in the Mail, which I just find genuinely staggering. So he quotes a guy called Tim Riley, a Russian specialist at Cambridge University, has delivered a pungent summing up. Putin could finish Andrew and the royal family anytime he likes with photos, tales and evidence he no doubt has on Andrew, is what this guy has told Andrew Lowney, who's written this piece in today's Mail. And they also talk about how they think Epstein got his money because he started off as a teacher. Did you know that?
No. And there's not too many billionaire teachers around.
He started off as a teacher, yet by 2008 he was jailed for 18 months for soliciting prostitution from a minor, and then over the course of time since 2008 has somehow acquired a private Caribbean island, a plane and multi-million-dollar homes in Palm Beach and also Manhattan. And this particular piece goes on to say, I believe that Epstein, generally believed to be an expert in hiding money from the authorities, spent years of laundering dirty money on behalf of Russian criminals and kleptocrats, probably within the connivance of Moscow. So this is a must-read for anyone who has got concerns or has interest in this story, but about the links between Andrew, formerly Prince Andrew, Epstein and also Russia.
Yes, and he was very, very good at using honey traps to ensnare and then blackmail wealthy men. And they paid for him to stay silent, and it's likely that the man was not a successful entrepreneur because of a great set of businesses that made loads of money. As you say, you're looking at money laundering, you're looking at corrupt cash that was floating around the place. And the issue you've got, therefore, the unedifying spectacle that the younger son of the King of the United Kingdom may have inadvertently been serving the regime in Moscow, and Andrew may have been Vladimir Putin's useful idiot.
I think that's a realistic bit of summing up.
At which point, the very foundations of the monarchy are rocked, are they not?
They are.
When you bring national security into it,
completely.
this gets serious.
It does. I think, to be fair to King Charles, I think he's done everything he could have done so far. But I do think there's an element of running out of road. What do you do next? I mean, there's nothing else to take away from Andrew, is there? I mean, the next logical step is he goes to live in another country and he becomes estranged completely to his flesh and blood and the royal family.
Is it a problem that he will be accommodated on the Sandringham estate free of charge for the rest of his life?
Yeah, I think for a lot of people watching and listening to talk at the moment this morning, they will think that sends out the wrong message.
Well, I think it's a big, big problem because it's royal property. It's our cash in the end, ultimately, isn't it? There is a suggestion from Andrew Lowney that the King will tear up that agreement to accommodate Andrew in Sandringham and that he'll have to go to the Middle East and a wealthy sheikh will take care of his accommodation. The problem you've got then is the possibility that Andrew will take revenge on his own brother and on his family. Yeah. It's not beyond the wit of man that Andrew could go to publishers and offer a book that will be entitled Andrew, My Story.
I think you're right. I mean, this is the biggest threat in my lifetime to the monarchy in this country, as far as I'm concerned. You know, I've lived through Diana, and I've seen the fallout from that, and various other royal incidents, and I think this is the biggest threat to our monarchy at the moment.
It most definitely is, and I think it's a huge piece of good fortune for the King that Starmer's in the headlines at the moment and Lord Mandelson, because otherwise it would all be about Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor.
Isn't that the case? You know, last weekend, this was a royal story, okay? Pretty much. It was just a royal story. I don't mean this I'm not being flippant because I know there have been victims of Epstein, but it was very much a royal story in the link between Epstein and Andrew, right? And now it is just spread in such a way that is almost unfathomable, isn't it? That it's you know, we've got a relationship here between Mandelson and Epstein that is currently rocking the centre of UK government, and there's more to come.
Well, definitely, and there's actually a very clean fix when a politician is in disgrace, which is that they either get fired or they resign, and that normally makes a problem go away. But members of the royal family can't do that. Andrew can't resign as Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor, can he?
Yeah. And from everything I've read, and again, Andrew Lowney's got some great insight and stuff, is I believe, from what I've seen and what I've heard, that the man formerly known as Prince Andrew still doesn't get it.
Of course not.
He doesn't get it.
Well, one of the reasons we understand why Charles ordered him out of the Royal Lodge prematurely, because he wasn't going to go until next week, but he's apparently already out. The removal vans came at 2 in the morning.
Saw the pictures.
And the reason being given is that the King was enraged at recent photos of Andrew following the Epstein row, driving around in his Range Rover and smiling or waving at people.
So here's the question. Is it arrogance or is it stupidity?
Well, it's probably a bit of both, isn't it? I would have thought. The guy he's got no self-reflection whatsoever, and he's not humble. He's an incredibly arrogant man. Royal insiders have told me that for a long, long time. He's very entitled, and that he thinks he's smarter than he is. That's why he did the BBC Newsnight interview, and he felt like he was going to do so well on that. And after it had finished, they were celebrating him and his team. Well, that went well, didn't it? Little did they know it would be the beginning of the end for the man. What happens to Fergie at this point? Because reportedly she's homeless.
Yeah, I mean, she's not come out of this at all well, has she? Some of these messages that we've seen that she's sent to Epstein.
You're the brother that I dreamed of
and then going to visit him after he came out of prison with her 2 daughters.
Taking the 2 young girls to meet a convicted paedophile.
I mean, in what world do you think that is acceptable?
Yeah. In the end, I mean, do you think that there is so much damage to the royal family from this Epstein-Andrew row that it could bring down the monarchy? What do you think?
I'd like to think not. I'm a royalist at heart. I like the royal family.
Because it is like Christmas for a Republican at the moment.
It is, and massively, and it's hard to defend, isn't it? In many ways, it's hard to defend. I don't think we're quite yet at the stage where it could bring down the monarchy. I think if more messages and more dispatches come out, particularly regarding the relationship of Andrew with Epstein, and particularly of Andrew Lowney's piece in one of the papers today, where he talks about the connection with Moscow and Putin in Russia. If that gains momentum and gathers speed, then I think that is highly problematic.
Was the king too slow to act with Andrew? Because it's our understanding that Prince William is spitting with rage about the very, very slow response to this Andrew scandal. It's our understanding that if William was king, he'd have stripped Andrew of those titles in 2020.
I think he has been slow, but I think it's a generational thing. I think William has his finger on the pulse more so than his dad regarding public opinion. He's more sensitive to it. He's grown up in a different way. He gets it in the way that his dad probably doesn't, because his dad, like his younger brother, Andrew, has been shielded from a lot of stuff and probably doesn't have that connection with the real world that William does.
William gets it. Duncan Barks gets it.
Thank you.
The king has been brutally heckled in regard to his brother Andrew's links to Andrew Epstein, Jeffrey Epstein, I should say. Rupert Bell is Talk's royal correspondent. Good morning, Rupert.
Good morning, Mark.
Listen, what do you make of that? It's not a good look, is it, for the king to be heckled by a member of the public concerned about his younger brother's links to a convicted paedophile?
Well, let's put it in. The whole thing, Epstein, is causing not only a political problem, as you've been talking, no doubt, most of the morning, but also this is an example of the constitutional fallout from Prince Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor's links to Jeffrey Epstein, because it is a huge problem for the royal family. And as we saw earlier this week, the king took a pretty dim view to seeing him being photographed in Windsor Great Park, and then said almost it was a sort of sling your hook, mate, let's get you up to Sandringham, because we can't have you grinning and going out as if there is absolutely nothing going on. And the fact is that the royal family is struggling to get positive publicity. So there is the king going about what he likes doing, which is a walkabout, and the Andrew fallout is causing him to be heckled at. Then I think there were things on the street about the royal oh, excuse me, Mark.
Bless you.
About the royal family. So really, this is a big problem for the royal family, and it is. But some would say, were they slow to act? Well, we all thought at the end of last year, the fact that when he stripped his titles, you thought, right, he's trying to get a grip of the situation. But this latest tranche of emails have compounded the problem and made the king have a huge problem. William, it was interesting, Mark, to see Edward sort of put his head above the parapet when he was in the UAE this week to say, I spare a thought for the victims, slightly hanging his brother out to dry. But it is a big problem for the king. How does he sort of prevent this sort of running out of control if it hasn't already?
Well, that's right. He needs a post-Royal Lodge strategy, doesn't he, Rupert? He's pulled every lever known to man, including stripping his brother of his Duke of York title. HRH went, of course, in 2020, losing the Order of the Garter. Let's take a listen. We do have the clip of the king being heckled. Take a listen.
Where did we get? I'm getting round the corner. I've been pressurised to please not investigating. Yep.
Well, of course, it's a tragedy for the king. He doesn't want his reign to be defined by a Cold War with his youngest son in California, his cancer battle, and his disgraced younger brother.
Well, and this is the problem for the royal family. They're desperate to try and get on the front foot, but everywhere you turn, there seems to be an issue. At the moment, the Duke and Duchess of Sussex are keeping a low profile, so there isn't anything going on there at the moment. But for Andrew, maybe they're just keeping a low profile because they don't need to do anything. For Andrew, it just seems to be getting worse. Even when you read that, what were they thinking when you suddenly feel that here that Epstein was bailing out Sarah Ferguson and that Andrew was having to step in, and that photograph in 2010 when they're seen walking through Central Park, he's trying to allegedly sort out the debt that the Sarah Ferguson had then when she was facing bankruptcy. You know, the whole thing is just so unedifying. And then obviously you hear some of the other stories and allegations around what was going on with women coming to London to meet Andrew. I mean, it just gets worse and worse, and it's such a bad look. You can't get away from it. And the royal family are just, you know, it's almost head down. Where and you hear Keir Starmer, he's trying to get into a bunker and keep his head down. But for the king, he's going to probably have to face a lot more of this, and when he goes on his public duties, which will be very distressing for him, because he does want to be seen to be out there. But okay, this may have been a lone voice, but it does reflect the simmering frustrations with people within this country. That what do they do about Andrew? What can he do? Bearing in mind, Mark, Andrew's always protested his innocence, but obviously there must be pressure on him to tell the truth and do something, and maybe now being squirreled away to Sandringham won't see his picture now grinning on the front pages of newspapers less often. But I'm sure there'll be people trying to find out what he's doing. You know, it's just the way the world works.
Well, indeed, how visible are the residents of the Sandringham estate? Will we still see photographs of Andrew in the Range Rover or riding horses?
Look, I think it's harder because obviously when you drive around the Windsor Great Park, it's open to the public. You can drive down there and you can see him, and obviously if he doesn't want to be seen, he'd make sure he was not seen. But when we see it, every time there seemed to be someone able to photograph him. So it is going to be harder because it's very much a private estate up there. But it's what Andrew does. And how does he cope now with being sent away into exile in Norfolk? What do the people of Norfolk think? And so around Sandringham, that they've got Andrew up there, disgraced now, in hiding almost. And for the royal family, I'm sure it is exercising them. Some people are saying, should they make a statement? Should the king say something? Well, maybe in time they're going to have to think about how they do deal with this, if at all. They obviously have the mantra, never explain, never complain, never explain, is their sort of in their DNA. But this Andrew case is not only causing the Labour government a huge headache, and bearing in mind Starmer has a weekly conference with the king as well, I'm sure the Epstein issue is something that they will have to have discussed, even though it's behind closed doors, because it's affecting them both in obviously slightly different ways, but it is still something that is causing both of them enormous headaches.
And speaking of headaches, it's my understanding that a number of members of staff are refusing to serve Andrew in his new accommodation in Sandringham. So he might have to answer his own front door, Rupert.
Well, yes, and does he know how to cook a pizza? Obviously, he went to Pizza Express, well, allegedly went to Pizza Express in Woking. The fact of the matter is, he's not always the most popular person, and it is actually interesting. If he had friends, I mean, people know because of his behaviour, he's short of friends. And if you were popular and you felt that even defending him, he might find it easier. But I'm sure there are rumours that the way he behaves with his staff is not very good. And so maybe they feel enough is enough. We don't need to be linked to him anymore. And it is going to be interesting. How does this develop? You know, will there be looks into what was covered up, maybe even by the protection staff, who must have known his behaviour, what was going on behaviour-wise. So there's going to be possible all sorts of ramifications. And for the royal family, this is a very difficult time in terms of dealing with that. Not only the king, as you say, trying to battle and continue his recovery from cancer. You know, he's in his mid-70s, and this is not, he wants to have enjoyed his time as king. Well, it has to be said, since he has ascended to the throne, it hasn't been a barrel of laughs.
No, it hasn't, and it's a shame because it's defining his reign at the moment, and it's a role he waited so long for. I've got a quick message, briefly, if you can, Rupert. David says, good morning, Mark. Do you honestly think that King Charles didn't know what Andrew had been up to? The Queen paid Giuffre compensation. Pull the other one, says David. It's got bells on it. And that's the headache for the king, is a perception that he must have known something.
Well, yes, because it would have been discussed, you know, his brother paying $12 million to Virginia Giuffre when he protested his innocence. Again, maybe there's, you know, Starmer's defence earlier this week as well, I didn't know everything. I just wonder whether the reason he had his title stripped is that eventually the king grabbed the situation and said, is anything more coming out? And probably Andrew may have had to say, I don't know. And at that moment, it was then that the king said, well, I can't risk it. You're out of here. And that would have been the moment. So, yes, they may have known his behaviour, but as your brother, you may be saying, well, I've got to have a degree of trust. And he hopefully, but unfortunately, it's beginning to look like that trust was very much misplaced. And yes, he would have known that obviously he's entangled in something since that Newsnight interview, and maybe before. It's been downhill all the way for Andrew. And actually, while he's going downhill, he does appear to be dragging the royal family as well.
Rayner is likely to be Britain's next Prime Minister. Will illegal immigration explode on her watch? Well, a year ago, here's the headline from the Daily Telegraph. Angela Rayner, every part of Britain will take its fair share of migrants. So if she becomes the Prime Minister, is there an illegal immigrant coming to a town near you? Let's get the views of a very impressive lady. She's the organiser of the Braintree protests in Essex, which happened last weekend. And her official name, her stage name, if you like, is Free Speech Shelley. Hi, Shelley.
Hello, Mark.
Lovely to have you on the show. First of all, why did you decide to be the organiser of the protests in Braintree in Essex last weekend?
Well, I myself was a victim of migrant crime along with my family, and I feel that the implications of unvetted men coming to our country is a danger, and it's being ignored.
Are you able, without going into too much detail, to give me a flavour of what happened in relation to the migrant crime that you suffered?
Yeah, so weapons were involved in the crime that was committed against my property and my family. There was a lot of police failures, and there is a court case coming very soon, and it's taken a long time to get there. But because of that...
Go on, you were going to say because of that?
Because of that, I feel that I have quite an understanding of a bit of a two-tier system that's happening across the country.
Most definitely. And I think there are some in the political world who don't understand that it's particularly bad if someone commits a crime against a Brit that shouldn't be here in the first place. That is worse than it happening at the hands of someone that's a citizen of this country.
Most definitely, and especially in my experience, you know, I've always been a taxpayer. Myself and my husband have never been, you know, arrested. We've got no sort of criminal background or anything like that. We did everything that we were supposed to do. We didn't retaliate, but unfortunately it took a significant number of months for any sort of justice to take place. And how are you bearing as well.
How are you bearing up in the aftermath of this crime that happened at the hands of an immigrant? What have you been going through emotionally since then, Shelley?
Well, at the time, I was 9 months pregnant, and I definitely suffered with, I would probably say, PTSD. I can't really remember the first 6 months of my son's life. It was a very troubling time, but I got the strength together because I don't want it to happen to anyone else. And members of my community are looking to me to help them and give them answers. And that's really what I want to do. I want to have good from this.
Yeah, well, I think that's a very, very generous thing of you to do, and very brave as well, Shelley. Tell me about those protests last weekend. How did they go?
It really was amazing. We had a lot of sort of local coverage and obviously media coverage of them trying to portray it as a very far right event, that, you know, that there was going to be issues. They closed the market. It was all very sort of dramatic. But it wasn't like that at all. It was an extremely peaceful event. There was actually only one arrest, which was from somebody on the left. that was attempting to throw a milkshake on Tommy Robinson.
So an agitator, basically.
Yes, most definitely. But everybody locally and people that travelled down, they were perfectly peaceful. It actually was a really nice, united event, and I felt that people were able to really express how they were feeling.
The public have had enough, haven't they, Shelley?
Most definitely. I think people are looking beyond the surface now. They're looking at how things are being spent by the council, myself especially. Me and my protest team have been, you know, doing freedom of information requests. We've been finding out how they're spending our money locally. I mean, more people are waking up, and unfortunately, more people are having to do their own journalism because mainstream won't cover what's really going on.
Indeed, including the real cost of illegal immigration, because it goes beyond migrant hotels, doesn't it?
It does. I mean, where I live, obviously, with the Wethersfield Air Base, we have the largest amount of migrant men in the UK held in that base. And I think still a lot of people across the country believe that those men are held there, but they're not. They can leave at any time. They're bussed into our towns for activities. They can go missing, well, they can leave the base for up to 7 days, and the Home Office don't do anything until that time.
Well, indeed. And what do you make of this headline? Because it's likely, Shelley, that Angela Rayner will be our next Prime Minister, with Keir Starmer under pressure. A year ago in The Telegraph, the headline, Angela Rayner, every part of Britain will take its fair share of migrants. What do you make of this policy of essentially filtering out these folk, normally undocumented young men, across the whole country?
I think it's disgraceful. We have enough issues in our country that we need to deal with, and we need to get our house in order before we can take in anybody else. It's a disservice to our legal migrants who have actually paid to come here. Yeah. They love our values. They're here to support us. And instead, we are allowing people to come in illegally. They've broken the law to come here. And also, you know, we are taking a significant amount of men in. And where are the women and the children?
Most definitely. And it is Brits of all backgrounds and colours who are unhappy with what's happening at the moment. This is not a far-right thing, and it's not about skin colour, is it? It's about people that shouldn't be here in the first place that have broken into the country.
Most definitely. Even in my protest group, I have Lebanese people, I have Indian, I've got Ukrainians, Polish, and it's really laughable, this rhetoric of racism. You know, you're racist if you feel this way. We're not. We can see what's happening to our country. We are, you know, there's plenty of money being spent on things for these migrants which shouldn't be happening. In my town alone, I mean, we're giving them art therapy, they're having cricket lessons, they've got their own football team. This money could be spent on nurturing the youth. You know, everybody says we've got a misogyny problem with boys. Well, let's nurture them. Let's give them some lessons with, you know, boxing, football. Let's do that.
More power to you. Shelley, how can people find out more about your campaign?
So we have a Facebook group, which is the official Braintree and Wethersfield protest group. I'm also on X, Free Speech Shell, and also on Facebook, Free Speech Shell.
What about the truth of the royal family, the state of the monarchy? Front page, page 8 of the Daily Mail newspaper. The inside story of Andrew's 9-day goodbye visit to Epstein in New York. The bad headlines keep coming. Let's get reaction from esteemed royal expert and biographer Ingrid Seward. Good morning, Ingrid.
Good morning.
Privileged to have you on the show. The bad headlines.
That's very kind, thank you.
Well, most definitely, because as I mentioned going into the break, you know the royal family very well. You've been reporting on the royals for many, many years now. Do you think that the damage to the monarchy has essentially been priced in from the Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor story, or is there more damage to come?
Well, I think because these files are so numerous, there's, you know, and it takes even, you know, the brightest journalists using AI, it takes a while to go through them. I think there probably will be more to come because, I mean, they're just so numerous. So it's not something that you can do very, very quickly. And these stories this morning, you know, they're just even more surprising. So it's a steady drip, 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 but it's a very steady drip. And I think it is damaging. to the monarchy. But when you look at, as you just have been, at our politicians, you think, well, I mean, certainly thank goodness that we don't have one of them as our head of state. I mean, at least we have King Charles, who is reliable and stable, and we know him. And we know that he's not going to do anything to destroy this country. He's going to try and help it. So I think that is really the situation, is that we have the monarchy. They're above politics. I know they can't do anything, but they're above politics. And it's, you know, at least we know that there's one thing that is stable in this country at the moment.
I completely agree. I think the King is a steady hand at the tiller. And I look forward with anticipation, Ingrid, to the reign of King William and Queen Catherine as well. I think the future's bright for the monarchy, but you've got this isolated, hugely problematic story of Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor. And the issue that the King has, Ingrid, is there are no more levers to pull. He's no longer Duke of York. He lost HRH in 2020 with the Virginia Giuffre payout. He's lost his membership of the Order of the Garter. He can't cease to be the younger brother of the King. There's not much more Charles can do.
There really isn't much more Charles can do. And also there probably isn't much more he wants to do. It is his brother. And he realises that he's just got to try and keep Andrew quiet and out of the way, because the minute he springs up, as he did the other day, you know, riding around the Windsor estate, when I think he was already meant to be at Sandringham, it's very difficult for the monarchy. King Charles was out doing an official royal engagement, and then people ask him about Andrew, which of course they're going to, you know, in this era, you know, people don't keep quiet. So it's all very, very sticky, I'd say, and more than embarrassing. It's difficult. But there's not a great deal more he can do.
Is there any chance that the King might consider tearing up his agreement with Andrew to accommodate him on the Sandringham estate rent-free for the rest of his life?
No, absolutely not. I mean, the King is not an unkind man, as we know, and he's very generous. And of course he wants to look after his brother, because his brother is at least contained on the Sandringham estate under the King's largesse, if you like, because he's paying for him. I mean, it's possible that he'll go to Abu Dhabi or one of the Arab states.
Yeah.
He could easily go there. But I don't think permanently. I think the Sandringham estate will be his permanent home for the foreseeable future. But I'm not saying he will necessarily be there all the time.
Will the Andrew scandal ever fall away, or does it risk becoming the sort of main sort of talking point of Charles's reign? Does Charles's legacy risk being tainted by this story until the end?
I think it will always be mentioned. And you know, it's certainly been going for a long, long time. I really feel that I don't think Charles's reign will be tainted by it. I think it'll be mentioned, but it's actually not anything to do with Charles, the way his brother behaves. And you know, historically, if you look at the monarchy historically, there's always been a lot of bad brothers.
And it didn't happen on Charles's watch per se.
No, it didn't. It happened on, of course, the late Queen's watch, and we know from everything that we understand and we hear is that she absolutely adored Andrew. And at the end of her life, he was very, very good to her. He was the one that always, I know he was doing nothing and he was nearby, but he went and had tea with his mum. He sat and watched television with her, and they just adored each other. And I think that was very nice for the rest of the family to know that Andrew was there for her. So there's a lot of things to put in the mix, if you see what I mean. You know, when you read the papers, you're looking at it from just one angle, which is we're all very, very angry with him. But there is another side to him, of course there is. And he is, it sounds strange me say it, but I am going to say it, that he is a kind person. And he was very kind to William and Harry when their mother died. And I don't think William is being portrayed exactly correctly at the moment. I think that William is stepping back from this. I don't think he's stepping forward. And it's up to his brother to deal with it. It's up to the King to deal with Andrew, not to drag his son into it as well.
What do you mean when you say that William is stepping backwards? Do you mean that William sees this as a hot mess that he doesn't want to be associated with?
Well, I'm sure he sees that. I'm sure he thinks that. And what can he do? What can William do that his father can't do? So if you look at it logically, there is no point in William being involved with this. I mean, he can say what he feels, but there's no point in him being involved because it's something his father is dealing with.
And we know that William has no patience with his uncle, given his behaviour and the bad headlines. And we saw that footage last year of the Prince of Wales and Andrew leaving the church. I think it was after the funeral of the Duchess of Kent. And Andrew was trying to engage with his nephew, the Prince of Wales, and William wasn't having any of it.
Well, that's how it looked, but we don't truly know. I think what actually was happening was the coffin was going past, and nobody, and everybody wanted to look, sort of very thoughtful and as the Duchess's, somber's the word, yes, absolutely, as the Duchess's coffin. So there's always a little twist to everything, and William seems to get the blame for being the bad nephew, if you like. But I think he's got enough going on in his own life at the moment not to be dragged into this. And I don't think Charles would do that to his son.
You're right, and it's not his mess to sort out. Ingrid's... I took a call earlier from Mary in Hemel Hempstead, and she said, this man has suffered enough. He's been found guilty of no crimes. It's trial by media. He's being vilified. He's being demonised. And Mary just said, leave it. Leave the man in peace. Do you have any sympathy with that view?
Well, I do. I think a lot of people feel that now. When you read a lot of the comments that people are making, particularly in the Telegraph things, a lot of them are saying, leave him alone. He's been vilified and his life is destroyed. So let's just leave him alone. But, that's not how we work, really, is it? We just don't leave people alone. And, of course, Andrew is very, very newsworthy. But I think that if Andrew is sensible enough to keep out of public sight, then he will be making his own life a bit easier.
Does he still have the support and love of his daughters, do you think, Ingrid, Beatrice and Eugenie? They're torn, aren't they? Because I think instinctively they do love their parents, but on the other hand, they're quite fond of those royal titles and therefore wouldn't want to be seen to be too close to their tainted parents.
Well, that's I quite agree with you, Mark, on that, because they both got jobs to do, and of course their life gets tainted by their father. And I think particularly with Eugenie, when this scandal really blew up, she worked for a company called Hauser and Wirth, which is an international art dealers, one of the best in the world. And of course it taints her and it taints them. And also Jack, her husband, was losing clients because of it. So they had to stand back, and I presume it was the same for Beatrice. Doesn't mean they don't love their father. I think they're just standing back from it. There's nothing else they can do.
Most definitely. And what about Sarah Ferguson? It's been reported, Ingrid, that she's quite low mentally and technically homeless at the moment, or about to be.
I really feel sort of shocked by Fergie. I mean, I've known Fergie for years and years, although I haven't seen her recently. And what we're reading is not the girl I knew. And I do feel I do feel a lot of sympathy for her. She's been greedy and stupid, but she hasn't committed a crime. She's just been, but I do feel she's very responsible for what's happened to her husband.
Well, she's quite a damaged person, isn't she? She came from a chaotic domestic setting, divorce, adultery. Her childhood was rather traumatic, and it seems like she bears the scars.
I think she does, and I think... But I mean, I don't see that as an excuse. What the problem is that she introduced Andrew to this high life, and then her debts, I mean, as I was reading this morning, her debts are the things that persuaded Andrew to keep his friendship with Epstein. Not totally, of course, But part of it was, that Andrew needed to borrow money from Epstein to pay off Fergie's debts, because Andrew didn't have the money himself. So the whole thing is a horrible, horrible mess. And I do feel that Fergie's responsible for quite a lot of it. And I think she probably feels she's responsible for it too.
Well, it is terribly sad how it's all played out. And King Charles waited so long to become king. And this is the mess that he inherits. We've got the small matter of his cancer battle as well. Briefly, Ingrid, if you can, what about the future of the monarchy? Do you think it's still secure, notwithstanding the bad headlines?
I do think the monarchy is still secure for very much the reasons I said. What alternative is there? And there's been so many scandals that have hit the monarchy over so many years that, and this one has obviously been the longest and probably the worst. It's certainly in lifetime. But I just think, yes, the monarchy, they're carrying on doing their everyday work. I mean, obviously, it's dented them and dented their popularity, but I'm absolutely sure that they will carry on. I think you get a bit dramatic thinking, oh, gosh, this is so bad for the monarchy. But then the next day, something else happens. News moves so fast now.
Now, the licence fee officially goes up to £180 in April. Well, that's nice, isn't it? It goes up to 180 big ones. A lovely pay rise. Unless you're a train driver, a junior doctor, or are on benefits, I doubt that you've had a pay rise lately. Nice work if you can get it. With newsreaders, presenters and pen-pushing middle managers enjoying a six-figure salary at the corporation, paid for by old ladies who are threatened with jail for not paying this exorbitant, punitive TV tax. Crazy that we have to pay £180 for the great privilege of switching on our television set. Imagine if you had to pay a tax to turn on your dishwasher or your washing machine. Well, actually, let's not give Rachel Reeves any ideas. So what do you get for your 180 quid? A Britain-hating narrative which shows that rewrite our history as being shameful and embarrassing. A Britain-hating narrative which sees breakfast TV presenters sneering at a politician for being interviewed in front of the flag of this country. A Britain-hating narrative which saw corporation bosses axe Land of Hope and Glory during last night of the proms. What do you get for 180 quid? Woke dramas like the TV daytime show Doctors, in which one of the nurses proudly announces that she's getting top surgery, which is a euphemism for the surgical removal of her breasts in order to transition her sex. Bloody hell! Whatever happened to Jack and Ori? What do you get for 180 quid? The desecration of brilliant franchises like Doctor Who, which is now a woke shadow of its former self. What do you get for 180 quid? Biased audiences on Question Time. And have I got news for you, with disproportionate loud applause for lefties and boos and silence for anyone that dares to be on the political right. What do you get for 180 quid? A vast budget for so-called talent, with, until very recently, the likes of Gary Lineker being paid £1.3 million to read our football results, or Zoe Ball on £1 million a year to play records and say that it's quite sunny outside. And until just a couple of years ago, nearly £500,000 of your money every year paid to the convicted paedophile Hugh Edwards, who, whilst being investigated for his wicked crimes, was paid by the corporation to stay at home and twiddle his thumbs. That guy, by the way, also has a gold-plated pension paid for by you and I. What do you get for 180 quid? An organisation that won't call Hamas terrorists and which happily broadcasts their propaganda, endangering Israeli lives. For 180 quid, you get a broadcast network which its former director of television, Danny Cohen, has described as institutionally anti-Semitic. What do you get for 180 quid? Eye-wateringly unfunny sitcoms with progressive storylines, worthy characters and an inclusive finger-wagging message. These shows, these BBC comedy shows, are about as funny as a fire in an orphanage. Go woke? No joke. There's no Only Fools and Horses anymore, no The Office, no Fawlty Towers. Those arrogant Armani-suited middle managers, ripped to the eyeballs on Colombian marching powder, can't bear funny comedies, can't bear balanced news, can't bear Reform UK and Conservative voters, can't bear the very country and the very people that this corporation is there to reflect, is there to inform, is there to educate, is there to entertain, and is there to represent. 180 quid every year is such a good example of daylight robbery, they should probably bring back Crime Watch just to report it. The BBC is an epicentre, a focal point. It is a locus of leftist groupthink, just like the civil service and just like the rest of the public sector. It detests Western values, it hates Israel, it's pretty sniffy about capitalism, it hates Trump, hates the Tories, hates Reform, hates Farage, loves open borders, thinks there are 100 genders. In other words, they think absolutely everything that you do not. Those who work at the BBC are a world apart from those who watch it and listen to it, which is, by the way, a dwindling army of viewers and listeners. Now, there are still some good things in their output, some good drama, some good documentaries, and at times, elite level production value. And there are some talented people as well. Fine. But that's a bit like saying that even though your local restaurant is a horribly overpriced dump, at least it's got nice toilets. The licence fee should be going down, not up. A platform like this one, for example, Talk, lives within its means, right? We could be paid for by coins down the back of the sofa at the BBC. And this week's audience figures at Talk have demonstrated that it's working, with the great British public tuning into this show and others for longer and in greater numbers. And it's not difficult to understand why. Because if you serve your audience and seek to represent them and talk about what matters to them and let them have their outrageous opinions receive a public airing, well then, with the best will in the world and with your fingers crossed, they will come back. But the BBC, they're not there to serve you. They don't see you as a customer. They see you as a cash cow, the useful idiots who fork out 180 quid every year. But the cash cow has turned a little bullish recently, with hundreds of thousands of people deciding not to pay the licence fee every year, which means that this draconian TV tax will eventually cancel itself out long before BBC executives have the courage to actually scrap it. 180 quid is an enormous amount of money. It's money that millions of people in this country just don't have, thanks to this wonderful, glorious Labour government, which has accelerated our economic decline. People are broke. They just haven't got that cash. And this hike in the licence fee is a scandal from a national state broadcaster that makes content for a tiny pocket of the population, resident in Islington, North London. The BBC must change or die, and the licence fee has got to go. Will, the bad headlines keep coming for Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor. King Charles is running out of levers to pull, isn't he? Andrew lost HRH in 2020 with the Virginia Giuffre payout. He's no longer Duke of York. He's no longer Prince Andrew. He's been turfed out of the Royal Lodge in the dead of night.
Yeah.
Is there much more Charles can do to rein in his errant brother?
Yes. He can stop funding his accommodation out of his so-called own money, and he can take a stronger rhetorical stance against Andrew, which I think so far he has failed to do. I was quite surprised by the earlier messages that showed some support for the King and even some measured support for Andrew there.
Yeah.
I suspect that is not in line with the sentiments of the majority of the country. I don't think that the King's response that this is out of his private funds will cut it. I think for better or worse, people just assume that all of the money of the King effectively comes from the country.
Correct.
Anyway, which is pretty much true.
It really is.
And so I think they still see that that funding is wrong. But I think the King had, fortunately, in a way that the Queen the Queen did not, has followed on this scandal as opposed to taking on a more active leadership role. I think there is a perception that he's a bit soft in a way that, say, a future King William would not be on this matter. And it is stripping a lot of paint from the royal brand, as it were.
I think you raise a really good point, and Prince Edward, he's not exactly personality of the year, but even he's spoken out saying, look, we have to focus on the victims, which is a very, very fair point. The victims get overlooked in this Epstein scandal. But as you say, silence from the king.
Yeah, that's right. I thought that clip from Edward, I think he was in Dubai, was a bit odd, actually. I can't quite recall the phrasing. Who are the real victims here? I think he said words to that effect. And I didn't think he'd been briefed particularly well.
Did you think it was equivocal, what he said?
It was a tad, yeah. And look, I understand that they are effectively a family. They are a family, but when you have a scumbag in your family, you have to call it out. And I don't think they've done that to the extent that they should have.
So would you like a keynote address from the king? Would you like him to speak to the nation, perhaps, in a specially recorded video in which he outlines his position and condemns his brother? How might Charles speaking out manifest itself?
Yeah, I think that would make sense. Look, for the way that kings in the past in this country have dealt with unruly family members was to chop their heads off. Now, for better or worse, times have moved on, so they don't have that lever at their disposal.
Prince Andrew's got such a big head, so it'd be a big bucket, wouldn't it?
That's exactly right. So the tools that he has to play with are, again, to forcefully put that out there. But
if you were like a spin doctor at the palace, you might speak to the king and say, look, we're actually going to call a spade here. You're going to address the nation in a 5 minutes speech, and you're going to outline, your concern for the victims unequivocally, and you're going to condemn your brother publicly as well.
Yeah. Look, this story just keeps going and going. I think that the old, keep calm, carry on mantra of the royal family just won't cut it when this story shows no signs of abating. There is so much material for the media to run with that it's just going to keep dragging on, and therefore I think a firm statement would make sense.
So a statement is very interesting, and then you would suggest that he turfs Andrew out of Sandringham, because Sandringham is a very opulent estate. People describe it as somehow like a bit of a small holiday home in the country. No. Yeah. First of all, there's a security ring of steel, multiple properties, including Marsh Farm, which is likely where Andrew's going to end up. It's a massive, comfortable house which will be staffed with chefs and butlers and maids.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I don't think it's tenable for him to be there regardless of where the funding is coming from. I think it will look even worse if Sarah Ferguson comes with him to that property. I'm unaware if she has so far. I don't believe she has.
She's currently homeless, we're told.
Oh, dear. The world's smallest violin.
Exactly. She's on London Bridge with a used Starbucks cup, and people are putting fivers into it.
Yeah, and look, the emails that have come out from her to Epstein are gross. They are absolutely
You're
gross.
the brother I dreamed of having.
Yeah,
marry me now.
Yeah. And she's tried up until this point to basically divorce herself from Andrew's relationship with Epstein, effectively saying, look, I was tangentially associated with him via Andrew. Ironically, Andrew said I was tangentially associated with Epstein via Ghislaine Maxwell, and that was a lie. But from what we can see now, the relationship between her and Epstein was far closer and more familial in nature than what she has suggested up until this point.
Most definitely, and you could offer a note of sympathy to Andrew that the reason why he reportedly kept going back to Epstein was to help Fergie pay her bills.
Yeah.
She needed the dosh, and he kept going, because he's a man of means, but Epstein was the cash cow, and Andrew leveraged that relationship with Epstein to help his ex out.
Yeah, she is. She's known to be incredibly profligate. I was hearing a story, I think it was on a Telegraph podcast the other day, where someone ran into her at an airport. She was heading back to the United Kingdom from the United States, and she said, "Oh, fly back with me to Blighty." And he said, "Well, I can't. I don't have a ticket on the next flight." She went, "Oh, that's okay. I always buy 2 tickets when I fly in case I meet someone interesting on the way.
That's extraordinary.
Yeah, it's levels of profligacy the average person just can't comprehend.
Like the end of the day, last days of the Roman Empire. Also in Andrew Lowney's book about the Yorks, she would commission an enormous banquets, and there'd be an army of chefs to create this amazing meal for 30 people, and then spontaneously she suddenly would decide we're actually going out for dinner tonight, and the food would be chucked away.
And the fact that she has been living off the public purse by staying with Andrew for all these years, I think 20 years, I think goes to show that the king is implicitly condoning this behaviour by allowing it to continue, by funding it, albeit out of his so-called private purse. I don't think it's tenable.
So we get a address to the nation from the king, condemning his brother, comprehensively throwing his brother under the bus, and he's turfed out of the Sandringham estate, at which point he fends for himself. What about the security issue?
Again, he is now a private citizen. He does not have, he should not be afforded security. Now look, I still think there are probably the odd rich connection that he has that he'll be able to wrangle money out of somehow. You know, it is now on him to fend for himself. For better or worse, that is, you know, I have no sympathy for him. This is the position he has put himself in. He had every opportunity. He had all of the connections in the world. You know, obviously being a royal entitles you to a great many opportunities that the average person doesn't have. He has wasted them. He's acted morally abhorrently. Bad luck if he doesn't get access to the perks now.
Prince Andrew was, back in the day, the most photogenic and attractive member of the royal family. He was well reported to have been Queen Elizabeth's favourite son. She doted on him. And of course, he was actually a bona fide war hero, respected by his military colleagues in his service during the Falklands War. So rather than the pretend war hero that Harry was, he was actually the real deal. Reading Andrew Lowney's book, there's no love lost between Andrew Lowney and Mountbatten-Windsor, but Andrew Lowney concedes that the colleagues, the people that worked with Andrew at the time, considered him brave, one of the team. So if Andrew were to have to fend for himself, is there the danger that he writes a tell-all book? And could that be Harry, you know, times 100? Andrew, my story. Because how much money would he make from that? If he went to HarperCollins or Penguin, how much cash could he squeeze out of them for that book? You're looking at tens of millions, aren't you?
I would have thought it would be comparable to what Harry got. I can't recall the exact number.
20 million Harry got.
20 million. I would see no reason why it wouldn't be in that ballpark. With the only caveat being if canny publishers recognise that he is incredibly desperate and will settle for something less, which is also true. Look, I hadn't considered that either. It's very possible. You know,
there's no contract, there's no legally, there's no NDA.
Look, the fact of the matter is,
and he knows where the bodies are buried. Will and Andrew's no angel, okay? But by God, has he got a few stories about Charles, about Camilla, about William and Catherine?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And look, Andrew is a thicko, but even it is starting, I imagine, to sink into him that there is no coming back. You know, there is zero chance of him finding any way to resuscitate his public reputation. And as a result of that, he may go, you know what, I've got nothing to lose. I may as well just get it all out there. I still think it's unlikely, but well, you can't rule it out.
It's unlikely, and Mary will be very happy that I say this. It's unlikely because deep down, he's a man of poor judgment, and I think he's rather stupid. But actually, he's quite loyal.
Yeah.
And he's never actively done anything to hurt the royal family in the way that Harry has.
And come to think of it, this is probably why, the combination of, I think, old-fashioned loyalty from the king, but also, I think, to the extent that there is a pragmatic side to this, he is probably aware that if he does cut Andrew loose, there is a chance that he could do, as you say, and just spill the beans on everything on the royal family.
And there is the security matter as well, because if he's on the Sandringham estate, then he does have that royal protection by default, and of course it wouldn't be a great look for the king if Andrew were to be knocked off in a foreign land.
Yeah, that's true. The interesting thing will
kidnapped.
Be... Yeah, the interesting...
Although I don't know how much ransom, he'd be like 11 quid or something.
Yeah, 11 quid in a Greek sausage roll. It will be interesting when the Prince William ascends to the throne, and long live the king. Hopefully that is a long way away.
Sure.
But I can't see him showing the same level of concern for Andrew that the King has. William, I think, is far more pragmatic than the King, and I also think he has a harder edge to him than the King. So I think it is unlikely that he would stay in Sandringham at that point, and that would then be very interesting to see the ramifications of that.
Colin has said, hey, listen, while I agree Andrew is a sick individual, there are many higher profile culprits with their names in the files. Why aren't you calling them out? Well, Colin, you're so right. Particularly Bill Gates, who reportedly tried to get antibiotics for a sexually transmitted disease picked up from allegedly young Russian women, and the suggestion that he was going to drug his then wife Melinda with antibiotics as well without her knowing. Keith says, good morning, Mark. The problem with Andrew is that he was the spare like Harry. They both had no real role, so had plenty of time to get up to no good. Keith, it's a great point.
Can I say on that, though, I don't buy it fully. I've heard that argument, but someone like Prince Edward has conducted his role on balance very, very well over a long period of time, despite no realistic possibility of ever ascending to the throne. I don't think that it's acceptable to say, oh, well, because you're number 2 in line, not number 1, that gives you a free pass, or that gives you some... I still think that it is possible to be a responsible, respectable member of the royal family if you don't have the obligations of the future kingship coming your way.
Where do we start? Where do we go from here? Do you think it's a dead cert now that Starmer is out by late summer?
Yes, is the short answer. Everyone can see it, and it is now a matter of when, not if. But he's incredibly stubborn. I think he will try and cling on for as long as he possibly can, but it is done.
He doesn't care about the country. He cares about Keir Starmer.
Yeah, that's right. The fact of the matter is, when people start thinking of your getting booted as a foregone conclusion, it then just becomes self-perpetuating, because every single story will say something to the effect of the embattled Prime Minister. When people have made their minds up, it is almost impossible to be able to change that perception, and people have made their minds up about Keir Starmer.
We spoke in the last hour about scorched earth policy. If he wants to take revenge on those seeking to unseat him, he could call a general election knowing he's going to lose it as an act of spite.
He could. I still think it is unlikely, but he could. Unfortunately, as we spoke about in the last hour, I think we are stuck with this government until 2029, and that's a very frightening thought.
Who do you think is more likely to replace Keir Starmer if he goes? Are we looking at Rayner, Streeting, or Miliband?
Streeting is a no, for a couple of reasons. I think the Mandelson saga effectively rules him out as well.
Because he was Peter Mandelson's protege.
There are photos out there of him with Mandelson looking very chummy together. I think the optics of that now are terrible. I think it is between Rayner and Miliband. Someone like a Shabana Mahmood would never in a million years be accepted by the Labor membership. So they are going to tack further left, and Rayner and Miliband are the leftist options. The tax stuff with Rayner, despite the Labor base still not really caring, I still think is problematic for her. Unfortunately, I think the most likely option is Miliband, and that is when you think about the implications for just more eco-zealotry, and the fact that he effectively sees himself as the Zoran Mamdani, the socialist alternative for Britain. It is going to be worse than what we have seen under Starmer.
We're between a rock and a hard place, aren't we? Because if we have Prime Minister Angela Rayner, there will be a war on business, because she was the author of the ruinous workers' rights package, which had to be watered down by this socialist government because it was so egregious. Or we get Ed Miliband as Prime Minister, in which case it's a war on our energy supply and a race to the bottom.
Yeah, I think you will get both under both, if that makes sense.
Because, of course, one will give the other a top job.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And my understanding is that Miliband has his eyes on Chancellor if he doesn't get the Prime Ministership. So I think you could very easily see Rayner as Prime Minister and Miliband as Chancellor. But I still think the most likely option is Miliband becoming Prime Minister.
And wouldn't it be ironic if the Labour Party elected him, because he did so much damage to the party when he was elected in 2010? because this is a guy that should have won that election in 2015 and he didn't because he was so unpopular. And this is a guy, by the way, that fell out with his own brother because he fought his brother David for the leadership of and David was a much more moderate figure, more of a Blairite type, who probably could have won that election. Red Ed takes over and puts the Tories back in power.
Yeah, no, it's food for thought. The other thing
he might do the same again.
Yeah. Well, the other thing you need to consider is there is no such thing as a safe Labor seat in this country anymore. So someone like Wes Streeting, for example, he's gone. He's going to lose his seat for the next election. Rayner is on a knife edge. She's got a better chance of clinging on, but if the trend line continues, she's gone. So that's something as well that they would need to consider is that the next leader will in all likelihood be scrapping just to save their seat, which will of course have an impact on their authority.
And we know exactly what's going to happen to Keir Starmer. He'll leave Parliament at the next election. Possibly he might lose his seat as well, even though it's in London. And he goes off to a top job in the EU or the UN.
Yep, no, that's
and he'll be laughing all the way to the bank. Another rich, retired lefty.
Yep, that's right. That's
they
the way
love their money, don't they?
They do. I joked on Twitter the other day that that Mandelson will either end up in jail or as the next president of the European Commission, and I would not rule out him taking Ursula von der Leyen's job because they do have a habit of just pushing these corrupt lefties into senior globalist positions. And you're right. Starmer will still be embraced by the Davos set. As he famously said, he's more comfortable in Davos than he is in Westminster. I've got no doubt that I can't see him on the speaking circuit. Surely no one would pay money to hear Keir Starmer speak, but he'll still be embraced by the elite class.
And rewarded for the damage that he's done to this country with net zero madness and open borders, which is the globalist agenda. Which is why I've had enough, and so has Will, and I suspect most of you have too. Let's take a voice note on Starmer's potential replacement from Kate.
Good morning, Mark, and a very happy early Sunday morning to you. Kate Wirral, just listening to the replacement alternative. Goodness me, what a choice we've got. Lamilula, Big Ange, or Miliband. Oh, Lord, is that really what we're left with? We are doomed. Roll on 29, hopefully 28. Bye.
Kate, you raise a good point. I cannot disagree with any of that. Tristan, take it away.
Mark, no, we cannot survive more of Labour. The time they've been in power, it's been a time of scandals, lies, and absolutely useless policies. And you're right. If Ed Miliband does become our leader, I mean, God, him and with his net zero lunacy, I mean, I just dread to think what will be left of the country. I mean, industry is decimated as we speak. I mean, I just can't even imagine if Ed Miliband became Prime Minister. Everything would go on net zero. I mean, we still haven't heard anything about carbon capture, that £22 billion black hole. That was and also that was a price for carbon capture. We've heard nothing. Unproven technology for someone that's never been in the energy industry and is in charge of our energy policy is just ludicrous. Great show.
Tristan, thank you for that.
Yeah, just a thought on this question of can the country survive. I think one of the things that makes this government so uniquely loathsome is that so many things that they are doing are irreversible. So if you implement a tax policy, for example, the next government can come in and just change the tax settings. But there are pubs which are closing that will never reopen. There are schools that are closing that will never reopen. There are demographic shifts as a result of mass migration that are very difficult to reverse. So I think there's something that makes this government unique and something which I think people are just incredibly sad about is that so much of the damage they are doing cannot be repaired, or at least is incredibly difficult to repair.
You can't deport 5 million people.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Some people will say that you can, and politically it would be incredibly difficult.
As we've seen in America with the ICE agents, even with a strong mandate and a budget to back it up, the Americans are struggling.
Yeah, that's right. And you've seen in America, in places like Minnesota, the intense resistance from deranged leftists. I suspect you would see a similar rearguard action in the UK as well if say a reform government was to come in and take a similar hardline deportations approach that to the US.
Yeah, they'd be on the streets making sure that we keep the pedos and the murderers on our shores, because that's how demented and deranged these leftists are.
I saw that footage the other day of Nigel Farage just having lunch somewhere, and those crazed fanatics turned up to the restaurant and started attacking the windows, and they had to board the place up. This is going to happen more and more, sadly, in the lead up to the election.
Those people harassing Nigel Farage, which is a disgrace, they never look like highly productive people, do they?
No.
I'd love to know what their contribution to the economy is, for example, these nose-ringed, green-haired ladies and gents.
I think it's pretty safe to assume that they are a net detractor from the British economy, not a net contributor to the British economy. You are going to sadly see more of this sort of civil unrest coming from the left towards Nigel Farage. They see him as Hitler 2.0. They think that violence is justified to try and keep him from 10 Downing Street. So this is something which is incredibly concerning. Reform have to put a huge amount of money into his security, because there are very credible risks and threats on Nigel Farage personally, and it is because too many people on the left think violence is justified in order to pursue their political ends.
Most definitely. Michael is in Oxford. Good morning, Michael.
Hello there, I spoke to you yesterday.
Michael, I can't get enough of you. You talk a lot of sense. Very interesting. You've got an idea for who might become Prime Minister. Tell me more.
Yeah, it might scare you more than Angela and Miliband, and that's Sad IQ Khan.
Oh, my goodness. The Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, parachuted into a safe Labour seat and becomes Prime Minister. Be afraid, Michael. Be very afraid.
Imagine what Trump would think about that.
Yeah, well, he would tear up the trade deal, wouldn't he?
He'd do more than that. He stated that no Muslims should have control of the nuclear button.
Wow, powerful words. Well, that's exactly right. Now, Michael, what do you think about the next 3 years? Are we going to get through it? How much damage can this government do?
Yeah, we can get through it, but what I don't like is this. This has been the last couple of decades where prime ministers disappear every 2 years. There should be a general election. If a prime minister steps down, there should be a general election.
Michael, you raised a fair point. What do you think about that, Will?
Yeah, on principle, if they did have principle, then I think that is reasonable. Like, you'll have traditionalists who say that the Westminster system means that it is the party that elects the leader, not the people. But in practice, the leader has a huge impact on the vote, on who you choose to vote for. So I think on principle that makes sense.
It's not unreasonable, is it? Let's take a voice note from Pauline, if we can.
Good morning, it's Pauline from Salford. No, if Labour stay in, this country will be absolutely ruined. And to be honest, I seriously believe Starmer is our best bet in keeping him in power, because Ed Miliband and Angela Rayner will just absolutely drag us down the toilet. So keep Starmer in, but we need a general election, because it's about time we had our say and we didn't have to put up with the crap that's going on at the moment.
Pauline, not pulling your punches, and why would you?
Question without notice, because we've spoken a lot about Miliband and Rayner. Is there a dark horse? Is there someone that we haven't mentioned that could come out of the woodwork?
There's this Armed Forces Minister, Al Kearns, who apparently is quite an impressive figure, but maybe not enough profile for the top job at the moment. The issue you got with Labour is the Tories historically have been very smart at electing someone that they don't particularly like who can win an election for them.
Yeah.
Whereas Labour tend to choose the kind of spiritual leader, someone that embodies the ideology.
That's right, and that's how you end up with people like Jeremy Corbyn leading the party.
Bingo. Bingo.
So generally what they try and do is that they tack left to try and appease the base, and then if they're smart, like someone like a Blair, they will try and tack further back to the centre after they get elected. But you're right, there aren't that many smart politicians left in Labor now. The bench is pretty bare.
Before I let you go, you are an Australian man who, I'm delighted to say, now plies his trade here in the UK, and long may it continue. Are Australians surprised at what's happened to Britain over the years?
Yeah, it's interesting you say that. I did a cross with one of the Sydney radio stations last night. We were talking about broken Britain in inverted commas. I think there is a level of sadness. But don't forget, so many of the problems that this country faces, Australia's facing as well. Problems that stem from mass migration, a lack of economic growth, a lack of social cohesion brought about by this failed multicultural project, a right-wing party in the Liberal Party there that has given up on conservatism, basically. And as a result of that, a populist alternative in one nation that's playing the reform role. When I look across both countries, the thing that I find really interesting and sad is that they are suffering from the same problems.
Indeed, and I think actually proportionally Australia has even higher levels of legal immigration than the UK.
Not even proportionally, in terms of just raw numbers.
Wow.
The amount of immigrants that have come to the country over the last 5 years is higher than the UK, and despite it being a big country in terms of total size, the habitable areas are relatively small. I've noticed personally when I've gone back to Sydney in the last couple of years, you can feel the change incredibly viscerally, in much the same way that you feel the change walking through cities like London or Birmingham here, and people have had enough. And after Bondi, that was a tipping point moment in the same way that the rape gangs here have been a tipping point moment. And you will see a political realignment in Australia, I think, in a comparable way to what we've seen with reform. And the rise of One Nation with Pauline Hanson is one to watch over the next couple of years.
Well, let's hope that Australia can be saved, and the UK as well. Two great nations on the brink, mutually assured destruction with their current woke policies. We need to talk about the royal family. And curiously, this has a political dimension, doesn't it? Because you've got a figure in Epstein who was friends with royalty and politicians. We've got a prime minister on the brink because of his appointment of Lord Mandelson as UK ambassador to the United States, a friend of Epstein's. Meanwhile, the bad headlines in relation to Andrew and Epstein just keep on coming.
Yeah, and actually, this then, because it's taking place, these allegations in Buckingham Palace, we've also heard, of course, about the shooting parties that may have taken back a few years before that up at Sandringham. So then throws into question just how much did other members of the royal family know of what was going on with Andrew's behaviour, if these allegations or these emails are correct? And I suppose most people are thinking they are. So how could he be allowed to have dinner with a Russian and a Romanian girl and Epstein in Buckingham Palace? It all seems pretty unseemly, and that is the issue. Then you take it a stage further. You can look at the actual instance, because, of course, if this is taking place at Buckingham Palace, there must be proof of that, because I'm sure everything is logged within the palace. So it's, I think, again, just adds to sort of the uncomfortable feeling for the king and the rest of the royal family that Andrew's behaviour has led to them. Maybe people say, well, what did they know? And that's why we saw this person earlier in the week when the king was out and about sort of making allegations to the king of what he knew and what was going on. So this is where I think it gets increasingly uncomfortable for the royal family, that if these latest emails are correct, how much then did the rest of the royal family actually know?
And Rupert, it's an aggravating factor if Andrew got up to his alleged activities on the hallowed turf of royal property and Buckingham Palace, no less.
Yes, and I think that's the problem, because I do know that Andrew is quite normal for members of the royal family to offer tours around for Buckingham Palace. It's not unusual, but I think it's this type of thing that perhaps becomes the more unusual aspect. Charities and people like and things like that are often given tours of Buckingham Palace by members of the royal family that they work with, or associations, so that's quite normal. But what isn't normal, perhaps we'd all be saying, having dinner with two ladies and Giuffre Epstein, where looking at these emails, it seems it doesn't seem quite the normal practice. And that, I think, is where the royal family have got some issues, and Andrew's behaviour is causing them a real headache. And okay, they have shipped him off to Sandringham and stripped him of titles, but it's still these drip feed of further revelations that make it even more difficult to know what to do for the royal family. How do they put all this to bed? What do they say if they do come out? Will they then be asked more questions because they might only be half the story? So it's not an easy position for the royal family to deal with. And Andrew has caused them a giant migraine.
Most definitely. And you mentioned the young women reportedly attending lunch at the palace, 4 young women, including and I quote, very cute Romanian girl. But there's also the small matter that Epstein was on royal property. That's a nightmare for the king too.
Yes, the whole thing is unedifying because, you know, this was in, I think these emails, if I'm not correct, were sometimes in 2010. You know, so again, it throws into the questions with all those interviews, how much was their relationship? And it was, you know, we saw them in Central Park. So it all just feels really tawdry, knowing what Epstein at that stage in 2010, the whole thing calls into question how were the royal family dealing with it, and allowing Andrew.
Most definitely, and sorry to interrupt you, Rupert, but you're absolutely on the money. It was September 2010 that these emails were floating around, and that was the year in which these young women and Epstein reportedly attended the palace. This is the first time I've seen reports that Epstein was on royal property. That is significant.
Yeah, and actually in that September month, that would be the traditional month, of course. The Queen would be in Balmoral. She goes up for most of August and September. So, you know, you look at it from that point of view, she's up north and he's got, you know, he's back in London, and then he's using Buckingham Palace for his own entertainment.
When the cat's away, Rupert.
You're absolutely right. And that is why people are saying, you know, he denies everything that he's done wrong. And if they were, you know, this is why, what sort of circumstances were those ladies working with Epstein, or was it just a normal relationship? But it just throws into question, you know, Russian security issues, what's going on. And that is the problem for the royal family. Andrews, and when you see some of the other emails that saying that, you know, almost using Epstein as a way of, Andrew was almost gullible at times in his need for money and everything, and using Epstein. So this was a way to get a hold into Andrew in a way that then he was able to be manipulated. So the whole thing is a big problem. And for Andrew, it just, you know, the drip feed of further allegations of his behaviour, you know, you almost feel you're going to get to a moment that's sort of meandering down, and suddenly there's going to be just a giant waterfall of revelations that put the royal family in even more difficult positions.
Any chance, Rupert, that the King will pull the plug on the deal to accommodate Andrew on the Sandringham estate free of charge for the rest of his life?
Well, I mean, in many ways, he should be fending for himself. You know, should he get his family be saying, right, we're bailing you out here? You know, because he did have all the privilege. He did have all the money. If he's frittered it away, well, you know, then it's for him to work out how he lives and lives within his means. And this was the problem for Sarah Ferguson, seemingly wanting $27,000 to pay a monthly rent. Well, if you can't afford that, what were you doing living in that kind of accommodation? It's common sense, but unfortunately, they loved the lifestyle. Hence the reason it was extremely difficult to get him out of a 30-room royal lodge. So because he had delusions of grandeur and lifestyle. So in many ways, the royal family should be saying, well, what can you afford to live in?
There you go. Am I the only one that's had enough? That's had enough of us not being a proper country anymore? What is the definition of a proper country? Well, it's the ability of a government to raise taxes, to provide public services. It's the maintenance of a justice system. It's the provision of civic facilities, and it's the maintenance of law and order. And it's one more thing. It is the protection of our national boundaries. And it's on that last point where successive governments, the entire political establishment, have utterly failed. And this shouldn't be left versus right, because it was a Labour Home Secretary in John Reid who coined the phrase hostile environment for those seeking asylum who shouldn't be here. And it was Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton who openly boasted back in the day about the number of deportations carried out on their watch against people with no lawful claim to remain in the United States. So enough is enough. If we actually want to stop the boats and establish proper border control in this country, 3 things are required. The first thing that's needed are resources, money, hard cash. We're going to need customs officials, border staff, police officers, and yes, the military. All need to be deployed in order to stop the boats. They won't come cheap, but it will be money well spent. The second thing that's needed is political will. A common sense government with a healthy majority and a clear electoral mandate to end what is now an economic, humanitarian and national security disaster in the Channel. But even with money and political will, nothing fundamentally changes unless we deal with this critical and decisive third issue. And that is the legal and constitutional framework that ties the hands of any government. Let me explain. We start with the 1951 Refugee Convention. So this was written in 51 in a very different world. It was after World War II, and it was created for a completely different world, a world of fixed borders, limited travel, and small numbers of identifiable, authentic refugees fleeing genuine persecution directly from neighbouring states. Under the original Refugee Convention, which was a great idea at the time, anyone who reaches the UK and claims asylum now has the God-given right to have that claim examined. We've got to look at it. We've got to take it seriously, even if they've entered the country illegally, even if they've come from a safe country like France, which of course all of them have. It doesn't matter if they enter illegally. It doesn't matter if they cross the channel in a small boat. It doesn't matter if they pass through several safe countries to get here. There is unfortunately no requirement in the convention to claim asylum in the first safe country. That's how mad the rules are. And illegal entry itself cannot be punished if an asylum claim is made. Did you hear me right? You can break into the country illegally, but we can't punish them because of the constitutional and legal framework that has destroyed our border security. So illegal entry becomes a gateway into the system. It's a welcome mat, not a deterrent. Then we've got the European Convention on Human Rights. This is an international treaty interpreted by a court in Strasbourg, you're welcome, that the UK has signed up to and to which we are bound. And through the Human Rights Act, those rights are now hardwired directly into British law. We got nowhere to go, folks. There's nothing we can do to stop the boats. That means that the moment that someone arrives in the UK, human rights claims are automatically engaged. The right to life, the ban on inhuman or degrading treatment, and crucially, the right to family and private life as well. In practice, this means that the British state must prove that refusing entry, detaining someone or removing them will not, and I quote, expose them to danger, distress or disproportionate interference with their personal life. Who cares about that? They shouldn't be here. And they're jumping the queue ahead of people that deserve to be receiving an asylum claim. That is how crazy the law currently is. That's why detention is not an option when it so clearly should be. Detention is not allowed to be indefinite. It must be strictly time limited, and there must be a realistic prospect of removal. The moment that removal is delayed by appeals, missing documents or legal challenge, which of course is how these woke lawyers operate, detention becomes illegal. So someone can break into the country, it's actually against the law for us to lock them up. Courts increasingly treat detention as arbitrary, harmful and a breach of the right to liberty. So people with no legal right to be here are routinely released into the community while their cases drag on for months and sometimes years. And then something else happens. Time passes. People form relationships, they have children, they build social and emotional ties. And those ties are then used to invoke the right to a family and private life. Article 8, to block deportation. And yes, that includes foreign criminals. So not only do you enter the country illegally, you harm British people, you steal a car, you rob someone, you rape someone. Your right to a family and private life is invoked thanks to this mad nexus of crazy laws. Judges are asked to weigh the seriousness of an offence against the impact deportation would have on their family life. Who cares? They've just broken the law and harmed a British person. And always the so-called family life wins. So this is how the system works in reality. Illegal entry, asylum claim, detention becomes legally risky. Release into the community, time passes, family ties form, deportation becomes legally difficult or impossible. By the end of the process, the law itself has created the barrier to removal. So that's why I would leave the European Court of Human Rights. That's why I would repeal the Human Rights Act. And that's why I would look again seriously at the Refugee Convention in the light of modern realities. And yes, I'm willing to tear it up. This is not about cruelty, it's about control. Human rights should protect people from the state, not prevent the state from functioning. If the law consistently blocks enforcement, overrides democratic will and destroys public confidence, then it's not compassion, it's dysfunction. And a country that cannot control its borders is not a country at all. And that's why at 13 minutes past 9 on a Sunday morning, I've decided to do something about the Refugee Convention, our membership of the ECHR, and our awful Human Rights Act, the brainchild of the rather coercive Tony Blair. I've got all three documents with me in the studio, including the European Convention on Human Rights. There it is. And what I've taken delivery of is this, which is a shredder. Okay? Now, I'm delighted to say that this shredder belongs to Engineer Dave. Engineer Dave is the guy that keeps this place going with hope and super glue. He's got a shredder, and the reason he's got a shredder is because he's Epstein adjacent. I'll spare you the details, but he's been doing a lot of shredding lately and a lot more sweating than Prince Andrew. And what we're going to do, let me make sure that... There you go. OK, it's fired up. We are going to change the legal and constitutional framework of this country so that we're able to police our borders and to take in genuine asylum seekers who are fleeing persecution, and those who cross the channel and break the law by entering the country and are paying criminals for their pleasure will be detained, deported and removed. So what we're going to do on Talk Breakfast is we're going to have a bonfire of the regulations, and we are going to shred the legal and constitutional framework that makes it impossible for us to stop the boats. We're going to start with the European Convention on Human Rights. Here it is. A very weighty tome. Here we go. This is live radio, live telly. There it goes, look at that. That is the European Convention on Human Rights. It's gone. Now we've got the Refugee Convention. From 1951. And last but not least, the awful Tony Blair brainchild of the Human Rights Act. Do your worst. It's thicker. Let's just get this going, folks. I'll tell you. Am I the only one that's had enough? This is what we're going to do. By the way, I'm going to finish the job. Don't worry about that. OK, do you know what's happened, folks? The old shredder's packed in. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to finish the job with my own bare hands. European Convention on Human Rights. Human Rights Act. Refugee Convention. Adios. Goodbye. It's time to look after genuine refugees, stop the boats and have proper borders so we can once again have a proper country.